Well, you also mentioned that most of the sugar companies which were owned by the government were privatized, and in the process of privatizing, did the fortunes of these companies actually improve?
Yes. There was an increase in production capacity. But what's happened with many of them is that they still take in brown sugar from Brazil and they refine. That's still what is, for now, on paper, we're not supposed to be importing sugar for consumption. What's imported mostly is brown sugar, which is then refined for the different uses that we have. And so that's one. That is working almost at full capacity. But for the sugar mills that convert from sugarcane to the other uses, ethanol, plant fiber, and all of that, yes, they are working at near full capacity, but there still is that distance. Of course, the installed capacity is very low compared to national consumption, and of course, what's coming out of the farms is still very meager relative to the needs of the country.
Well, looking at the amount of land, that is allocated to such farmers, industry players say that Nigeria has with a land potential of over 500,000 hectares of suitable cane fields. Nigeria is capable of producing over 5 million metric tons of sugar cane, which according to NSDC, when processed, can yield about 3 million metric tons of sugar. Dr. Sumaila, could you just react to this?
Yes, because what the response to that basically is to tell you that the insufficiency in terms of the allocation of hectares for such a production. So what we are saying that basically is to see that, yes, if really we want to improve this sector, as we are now, as enunciated in the master plan, even though it has not been activated, or rather is not fully into action in implementation, but the most important thing is that, yes, the farmers needed to be encouraged with the provision of the farmland, because if the farmland is not there and the support required for it, it will be very difficult for them to be encouraged and for them to see what they can do in realizing the vision and the mission of the federal government as far as that sector is concerned.
You said farmlands, but what Dr. Akinleye says is that they don't really need so much, land to cultivate the product. So it now calls the question that do they require as much land as the cassava grower or the cash crop grower or the rest of them?
No, apart from that, you see, the issue is not just on the land availability or whatever. There are other requirements, because if water is not available, as some of the places he's talking about now, Numan, Kano, or Jigawa, and all that, if the flow of the dams that are there in those areas are not for the support of the product, it becomes very difficult for the flourishing of the product. So the most important is that, yes, apart from we are talking about having insufficient land for the product, because it is something that wherever you are, provided there is water there or meshy land, the whole thing can grow effectively. But some of this area lack such facilities. So the government need to improve the need for the irrigation system, which need to be properly positioned in such a way that, yes, that can now flourish in the way that things will be. And if that is not, that becomes the problem, because the most important thing is to see how the farmers can now get themselves in tune and be happy with whatever kind of production they are going to provide in that area. Because if that is not there and the support is not there, like we are talking about government giving them support for what's needed to be there, then what that means that at the end of the day, there will be disillusion. And like I told you earlier, most of the farmers, the sugarcane farmers, their challenge is that it is not just the little one that we have, it is not just the production or whatever, that they lack industrial buyers for their product. So it's not just to embark on this thing. You must organize them in such a way that there are industrial buyers for whatever kind of production they are making. So if they have that, of course, that will guarantee support in that area. And then one of the, I just want to make reference to the statement he made earlier in terms of when you asked about the issue that has to do with the privatization. Yes, whether we like it or not, as a result of the privatization, that has increased the level of employment in such a sector in this country. And by improvement in the employment in that area, that is indeed improving and boosting our economy. And of course, to some extent, reducing the rate of unemployment. This is a sector that is very great when given the opportunity to thrive. But we need that support, the encouragement, and full implementation. Like there is no need for us to say, okay, the master plan was just launched about 6 months ago or whatever. If you are talking about the needs and wants of the customers at any point in time, then the sugarcane farmers needed to be kept in abeyance. You have to try as much as you can. Whatever kind of plan you have for them, you have to articulate them, get them integrated, and work towards implementing all that needed to be done.
Now let's talk about the National Sugar Development Council. In its role, has it made any impact in the industry? Dr. Akinle, yes.
Yes, it has, sure. It's been beyond much of what we advocate as the National Sugar Master Plan. Sugar or sugarcane, by and large, okay, I can tell you as of today that sugarcane gets more irrigation water than every other crop in Nigeria. Okay. It gets more water than maize, it gets more water than all of that. And you mentioned earlier about allocating land to sugarcane. Nobody actually does allocate land for that. What happens is that farmers make rational economic decisions. Okay, and so if I know that if I grow maize, I will make this much money. If I grow sugarcane, I will make much more money. Of course, the farmer is going to pick one over the other. The reason why there are still unused lands is because the economic returns on the lands are not worth the effort of the farmer. And so once we can generate industrial capacity, we know that there is final consumption available. Once we generate industrial capacity and the incentives to grow sugarcane, of course, the sugarcane sector can then achieve its potential.
But then you see there's this challenge that despite all the efforts through the Nigerian Sugar Master Plan and the National Sugar Development Council to improve the subsector, the challenge still remains evolving strategies to meet the demands of the 168 million consumers and prevent spending hugely on imports.
The only way to prevent spending hugely on imports is to produce locally. We know as at now that the capacity to produce locally is hampered on two fronts. One, milling capacity. Two, production capacity. The final consumption is ready-made. We produce enough in the country to, in fact, as at now, Nigeria is the second largest market for sugar in Africa, but the 19th largest producer in Africa. And when you look at the potentials from the sector, you could get ethanol, you could generate power, you could generate fiber and food, you could generate sugar for final output, you can generate employment, you can generate dollars from exportation. Okay? And so it's not necessary for me, it's everything is in place to profit from the sector. Is the institutions are already in place. It's now the capacity to achieve all of that potential that the National Sugar Master Plan and the NSDCD is working on and putting a time frame of between 2015 and 2020 to see how much further we can go.
Okay, so when we come back after this very short break, we'll look at the challenges of the sugarcane value chain and whatever else that we come up with in the course of our conversation. Well, you're still watching this morning on Channels Television, and today on the program we're looking at Nigeria's sugar market, and I have here with me in the studios two gentlemen, Dr. Durand Akinle, he's a lecturer at the Department of Economics at the University of Lagos, and Dr. Mande Samaila, he's a lecturer with the National Open University of Nigeria. We'll be right back.